Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your seats, we're about to start. We'll begin this session with a very short introductory video to what GRID is. It's in Ukrainian, but there's English subtitles. And then we'll move into the plenary. We'll move into the side event after that. Thank you.
Це Україна. Країна, в якій потрібно буде відновити території, що зазнали впливу війни. Завдяки супутниковим технологіям ми бачимо і фіксуємо все, що відбувається. Але жодна технологія не давала відповіді на головне питання – які ділянки і в якому порядку слід розміновувати. Саме для цього створили платформу автоматичної пріоритизації гуманітарного розмінування – GRID. Ми досліджуємо територію в глибину. Зібравши дані, ми опрацьовуємо їх та застосовуємо методики, розроблені провідними науковцями, щоб відновити наші землі. Ми знаємо, що тут росте, який тип лісу, які підземні води та який ґрунт. Ми також бачимо і економічну історію. Що вирощували, скільки податків сплатили та що може зростати тут знову. Ми оцінюємо, наскільки ця територія важлива для людей. Чи є поруч школа, лікарня, дорога, наскільки легко сюди дістатися. Безпека – ключовий параметр. Ми аналізуємо, наскільки ділянка близька до лінії бойового зіткнення та який ризик вона несе. Фіксуємо сліди боїв, рахуємо кратери, прогнозуємо кількість небезпечних об'єктів. Визначаємо, скільки часу та ресурсів потребуватиме її очищення і скільки це коштуватиме. Знаючи соціальне, економічне та екологічне значення ділянок, можна визначити обґрунтовані пріоритети гуманітарного розмінування для кожної з них. GRID вже зараз збирає, нормалізує та аналізує дані, визначає пріоритети розмінування і показує, де вкладення ресурсів дасть найбільший ефект. Гнучкі та прозорі алгоритми аналізу – це про довіру до запропонованих рішень усіх учасників сектору розмінування. Завдяки GRID ми можемо спрогнозувати, коли розмінована ділянка знову стане безпечною, продуктивною, живою. Приєднуйтесь до GRID. Відновимо Україну разом. Ми знаємо як.
Right, thank you. I'm Paul Heslop. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for Mine Action in Ukraine, embedded in the Resident Coordinator's Office. I've been in Ukraine for the last 3 years. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about what I think is probably one of the most groundbreaking areas in the use of technology in mine action today. what its potential in Ukraine is, but ultimately, if we prove it to be successful in Ukraine, how this could change humanitarian mine action around the world. We're looking at a very nice promotional video there. I mean, but what we're really looking at is if we get this right, instead of working from the traditional layer of mine contamination data that's listed in IMSMA, and then the human knowledge and skills required to sit down and evaluate how those areas affect communities, how areas should be prioritized. I remember 20 years ago sitting in Sudan trying to work out what were the priority roads that should be cleared. We had different stakeholders coming in, and it probably took us 3 or 4 days of work. The system that has been developed in Ukraine would do that, if not in seconds, in minutes, and certainly no more than hours. So the potential to be able to make better decision making, actually based on data, is huge. I mean, the GRID system is drawing down on over 20 layers of data. This might be cell phone usage data, data from Ministry of Agriculture, data from Ministry of Economy, data from Ministry of Forestry. So there is so much data going in, it gives you that ability. And the criteria that can be set, whether it's looking at whether there's an economic importance, or as they say, is it a proximity to school? Or we could turn around and say, please indicate any minefield within or dangerous area within 500 meters or a kilometer of a school. Please evaluate how long it would, how we could reduce travel times by clearing certain sections of road or infrastructure. And so I think what we're looking at with GRID is the potential to finally move forward on something that I've been banging on about for years, which is outcome-driven decision making. What is the outcome? What is the impact? Not the not the output of how many meters cleared or how many mines cleared, but what is the outcome that we will get? Will we get a positive outcome, or will we avoid a negative outcome? And can we actually then be much more realistic in what we're trying to achieve? We can then provide that justification to the donors or to the ministries or whoever that will provide the resources to do that and have a much stronger case. So we will reduce the amount of clearance we need to do. We'll clear the tasks that have the most impact, and we'll return communities in a much faster way and more effectively. And that's what I believe why I have put my weight behind this, and I know there's quite a lot of it, to try and move this forward. I'd love to see GRIT adopted and rolled out properly in Ukraine this year, which I think we're very close to doing, and then see it move on to the other UN-backed programs. Obviously, UNDP are very supportive of this. We discussed this with UNMAS yesterday, and I think there's a real potential for this to be rolled out around the world over the next 18 months if we can prove it. So with that, I'll hand over to Deputy Minister, who will give his perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. My team prepared great comprehensive speech for this panel discussion, but I spent 3 days in that building, had a lot of meetings, and I tried to upload to my head the speech, and it's not working. I will try improvise and make some overview, some helicopter view about what is GRID and how it happened and why we are talking about this system. First of all, when we're talking about GRID, it's not software. It's something that I can describe, and it's first of all, it's a people, a team from Kiev, around Kiev, some cities, Kharkiv, Lviv. Actually, it's 7 data engineers who working daily in the system and building some algorithms, stabilizing data, and so on. It's a lot of data. It's like 30 sources of from different ministries or data providers. It's more than 100 different types of data, and it's third part of this system. I have no idea of what is it, how we should name this. It's a supercomputer that processing all the data with algorithms that create data engineers and so on. GRID physically not exist. If we will just take from this formula data engineer, it will not exist. If we will take from this change, some supercomputer probably will. Now we're working with Palantir engineers, but it can be like it will not work like it's working now. The same with data. And yeah, it's first what I want to say. GRID system, it's not software, it's something new. I have no idea how to describe. And how we did it, it started from simple questions that I asked my team, they asked what we are doing. And the answer was too simple, like we are doing clearance. And next simple question was like, for what? Because we should do clearance. But for what real? Like who will use that area? How many it will cost, what's future in this area, and some perspective. We don't have any ideas how found answer to this question, and started from collecting data. Just collecting data, more data, and more data, and after that it says something bigger and starts answer for us and question, not just simple question like for what we are doing, for what and so on. Now we have something like real digital twin of each cadastral plots in Ukraine, and we know who is owner of this area, what type of agriculture was farming in this area, how many taxes generate this field before full-scale invasion, how many craters happened in this area after full-scale invasion, how many cubic meter of soils was displaced in that field, and a lot of information. And now we are trying build approach when system will create for Ukrainian government some kind of draft of decision. like looks government. It's like your problem. It's should be priority if you will focus on this one. If you will focus on this one, it's best way if we will stabilize different like sliders in the system, because we are focusing on the economical impact, environment impact, and social impact. I hope Olena will talk more about this. Probably somebody else will talk. You will? Yeah, great. And now we are using it not just for create priority in our plans, what we want to make clear, and for what. Also, for finding some kind of truth, because when we try and like believe just for one data sources, it looks like okay, everything understand. We have like 1 million hectares contaminated areas. But it's really not answering the question what scale of problem. And when we start like see the truth, we have more and more questions. Last interesting question that we found answer, it was 2 weeks ago. We have strange tradition in Ukraine, probably in other countries also has this same tradition. We visited our dead relatives in a cemetery in some special day in a year. And they asked, how many cemeteries in Ukraine actually contaminated? And nobody know how many. And it's not means that all cemeteries was safety. It means that we don't have this information, and used few like clicks found it. And yeah, grid is first of all people, data engineers who super talented and created the system. It's a lot of data and a lot of simple questions that we are trying to find answer.
Thank you. So thank you so much for introduction and the opportunity to present the system. Our system is the platform for data-driven demining planning, and as Ihor was mentioning, we started from a very simple question, like what should we demine first? So my name is Elena Pernyuk, and I'm a leader of GRID project. I'm working in the support team for the Ministry of Economy, Environment and Agriculture of Ukraine. And of course, GRID wouldn't be possible without the support of our partners, because indeed, teams are important. So we have the support from UNDP, JICA, FAO. We are working with different technical agencies, donors, and data partners, and we value this collaboration a lot. So we had a bunch of technical questions, like where will demining bring the greatest impact? Are children safe when they're going to schools? Can we explore the data without waiting weeks for analysis? There were a bunch of questions. So we started from that, and we came to the very simple answer of the demining prioritization approach. So we decided that we want to demine the territories like the low-hanging fruit. So we want to demine first something that is easy to be demined and will give a great benefit, and then we will be proceeding with demining something that is more complicated. Well, simple questions, simple answers, but the mechanics and the algorithms standing behind it, you can imagine, is quite difficult. So we are comparing demining benefit, which includes social, economic, and environmental potentials of the territory, to the safety recovery effort, meaning the amount of time that is necessary to demine this territory. And obviously, if the territory has a high potential, like low complexity of demining and high potential, it will be demined first. And then the more complex it is, the lower in the priority list it will be. So we created the system where we are assembling a lot of data, a great data ontology that includes state registers, commercial registers, satellite imagery, mobile operator data, demining operator data, open data sources. Like we have more than 150 different data sources, and they are connected where possible via live connection. So Ukraine is quite blessed with data, and we are able to do that. And we assembled something that we call the data pie. So we have a lot of different data that is assembled to geo-coordinate. And we are, by comparing everything of that, we are able to provide the information about the priority of each land parcel, which is cadastral plot for Ukraine. So we bring all of it together. We have all data, all ontology of data in one place. We are creating the digital twin of every cadastral plot. We can provide transparent analysis, and we can reproduce it afterwards. Like if after 3 or 4 years someone will ask why this plot was demined, what was the decision behind it, we can provide the log and we can explain why was it demined. And of course, right now we are starting to get to the what-if scenarios and the modeling of everything. Grid, which is extremely important, it doesn't change the mine action process. We are working in accordance with the IMAS, of course. But what we can provide is we can provide the real-time execution monitoring. And we are revising demining plan. We can revise it every day, but at least we have people who can see the change in the situation, and as the front line moves, as political situation is changing, we can see the impact that it is making on our demining market. So now we will go to something that is much more important and interesting, our use cases. Like, for example, we had the question, how can we enable the return of the agricultural activity? So we conducted a bunch of analysis, and what we found out that about 20,000 agricultural cadastres have about 3,000 dangerous territories, and that will bring us to the decision that we need to make a policy change. We need to provide the demining plan based on grid priority scores and provide it to the decision makers. And of course, we are able to provide the after evaluation of farmer for demine programs, because Ukraine is providing the support to farmers. We can analyze the cultivation state, because basically Ukrainian farmers are very fast, and they don't want to wait until demining will be finished. They are cultivating everything. So we decided that if this territory is cultivated, it means that probably it is not dangerous all over the territory. So what we can do is we can provide the fast-track tax survey and provide the certification, which will make the demining process faster and hopefully more efficient. And also we are assessing the land damage by counting and calculating each crater from high-resolution satellite imagery. And what we can do is basically we can model the pollution of our territory for future use. Another important humanitarian question is how many schools and offline students are near dangerous territories. Again, so we conducted the analysis, and we saw that inside 1 kilometer radius around the hazard we have 25 schools, which is 4,000 students. 1 to 3 kilometer we have 140 schools. So we need to engage the EORI campaign to train kids not to go to the contaminated areas. And in the area, in the radius more than 5 kilometers, we have like 226 schools. So we have to proceed with informing, and we have to contact the demining operators to work better with EORI. Our question was, what are hazardous forests and how do we act on them faster before operators will go there? So we identified the mined forest. We are using the mobile operator data to identify the amount of people who are walking there. So what we saw is that we have 4 million adults and 150 children who are visiting mined forest. And it means that we have to go with the awareness campaigns, and we have to again go better with EORI. Again, the case that Deputy Minister was referring to. So we know that people during this weekend, they will go to the objects of social importance, and it is cemetery for us. So we conducted a very fast analysis using our AI agent, and we call it Talk to Your Data. We saw that there are 50 sites that are inside dangerous areas, and they need to be prioritized for a non-technical survey. And then within 1 kilometer, there is about 300 sites, 300 cemeteries that might be dangerous. So something that is extremely important for us is that we are introducing AI-powered analysis because right now, for example, the analysis with the cemeteries was conducted within 30 minutes, and we took half a day more to verify the results, because it is not the AI that making decisions, it is, of course, people who are making the decisions. Thank you. Please, Tiffany, could you please continue the speech?
Can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Lucas from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. I wanted to speak about, from the perspective of the data provider for the operationalization of grit in Ukraine. Good data can make vulnerable people and vulnerable situations visible, and poor data can indeed create bias. And this is the perspective that I would like to take, because in reality, I think if we step back and we look at the situation in Ukraine 3 years ago, we had what was called the Orange Zone, which is everything that has been liberated by the Ukrainian forces. And this was considered potentially hazardous. And when we see now what Ukraine with partners could create and the degree of precision of what is integrated into grit, I think it's really impressive. And seeing what's happening nowadays in countries like Syria, I think we can really be inspired on what has been the progress over the last 3 years in Ukraine. So the role of FAO and its partner, the Ukrainian Researcher Society, is to provide quality data to make sure that grit will operationalize on what represents the reality. We are developed a methodology that has been tailored to this specific case scenario. And this methodology is further verified by FAO at the global level, by the geospatial unit of FAO. The objective is really to have something that is neutral and something that Ukraine can use, having this technical backup, and the understanding of this cannot be discussed, at least from the technical perspective. We have covered the majority of the oblasts that have been severely affected, and we will continue covering depending on the needs of Ukraine. And for us, obviously, the end objective is to support the strategic objective 1 of the government, which is not land release per se, but the return of land into productive use. Each data set gives birth to a publication. So you might know that the publication from a technical UN agency have a certain value, and this is what we want to bring on the table. And we will be also ready to work on forestry or water resources, for instance, with the vision of having this contribution to an outcome-oriented mine action programming. So you have the different publications here and the QR codes. Feel free to reach out in case you have questions. The methodologies for each data set are described. Each report is something like 300 pages, so it's quite detailed. And we are open to discuss any aspects of the data sets or algorithms that have been created for this specific use. In the future, and our vision is that this process that is to date rather expensive, meaning the data creation, and human resource consuming, we would like to create algorithms that are more rapid, efficient, less expensive, so that the government will be able to update the data sets every planting season, because the objective is to understand in real time when farmers are returning to the land and to reprioritize in case certain lands are already in use. In the future, we would also like to connect soil pollution, chemical soil pollution, and data sets that are currently being created with another branch of the Ministry of Economy, Agriculture and Environment. We would like to digitalize this ancillary data in order to make it something that can be operationalized by GRID as well, and that can orientate mine action with this vision on which lands will be returned into productive use with minimum needs for remediation. So this is our contribution, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you may have later.
I want to make a short remark. All that brochure that was in the previous slide, it looks like this one. It's a lot of information to read and survey.
I'll hand over to my colleague from JICA.
Hello. Yes, can you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you very much for involving JICA. My name is Yoshinori Asada. I'm the technical advisor to the Cambodian Mine Action Center. At the same time, my role is to coordinate with the support for the Ukrainian colleagues. So from me, I'd like to share a donor perspective on this value of the grid. As we have already heard from other colleagues, grid has demonstrated significant potential. A number of the partners are already supporting this initiative, so which reflects already the shared recognition that grid has contributed to improving the decision making for the Ukrainian government, important decision making. Yes. Then particularly in how governments prioritize the mining activities as well as recovery and development effort as a nexus approach. So Japan also has been supporting this initiative since last year through JICA. Why does JICA also supporting this grid? So let me briefly introduce JICA's support to humanitarian mine action. Sorry, my slide actually, I will explain later. This is a latter part of my presentation. Under JICA's strategy for mine action, strengthening national capacity is one of our key pillars in this humanitarian mine action. JICA believes that ownership by national institutions or authority is key to achieving effective development impact and sustainable efforts in the mine action sector in that country. For example, JICA has long supported institutions such as Cambodian Mine Action Center, CMAC, in building sustainable national capacity in mine action. CMAC is now not only implementing its mine action activities in Cambodia effectively, but also is expanding to share their knowledge of practical experience with other affected countries. So, by the way, we will have another side event on the last day, so please join us. So in the context of the national capacity, the grid strengthens the national capacity by enabling government, in particular local government, to prioritize mine and UXO risks in line with recovery and development plan through a transparent and data-driven nexus approach. From a donor perspective, this approach offers huge advantages. When national counterparts allocate resources based on the transparent and evidence-based priorities, they become more reliable partners, enabling donors to provide support with greater confidence and accountability. At the same time, as a common national framework, GRID has a potential to capture the local differences in each region across the country in Ukraine and help consider more balanced support and effective resource allocation across the region in the country. So with this background, let me quickly introduce a pilot project currently being implemented in Izium, Homrada, Kharkiv Oblast in Ukraine. This slide is related to that one. Through the pilot, this activity is a collaboration with the Ministry of Economy and Environment Agriculture. And then we are finding this through the pilot, we are examining several key questions. Is the data within GRID sufficient for decision making? More importantly, is there any gap between data-driven prioritization and the actual needs of the communities. First, we work together with the local NGO, Relief Coordination Center, RCC, and local authority of in the Izium, Hamada. We identified the 10 candidate infrastructure project, as you can see in the top of the inverse square, triangle. Then, based on the grid data, and also we combined the field visits as well. Then we selected the 10, actually the local government, together with the RCC, decided the 10 candidate infrastructure project. Then, through community consultation and voting, the candidates were further prioritized up to 3. Then the pilot conducted a public vote involving approximately 1,500 residents. As a result, a sports facility was selected as a project to be implemented. After that, finally, additional consultation was also held to gather community input for the implementation. So one lesson emerged from this process is that even in data-driven decision-making, it might be essential to incorporate community perspective. In this case, a sport facility was selected. However, if we had relied solely on this grid data, perhaps I'm not sure that such a project would be being prioritized. So this reflects an important principle also seen in Japan's case, Japan's disaster recovery experience, namely the importance of listening to the voices of the affected communities. Another example, I think the Excellency Besgobaini and also my colleague Olena mentioned that cemeteries analysis, which actually cemetery also raised as one of the candidates in this 10 candidate project. But due to some land ownership issue or some technical reason, that was excluded already. But it holds strong culture and emotional significance for the community, especially during the war situation in Ukraine, and also during some important event like Easter. People really want to visit that place. So at the same time, it does not necessarily have the clear economic value. So this raises an important question. How should we prioritize facilities that are socially and culturally important, but not economically driven? So looking ahead, we believe this pilot may suggest some practical recommendations on how local government can effectively use grid and how they formulate their prioritization process. The project is still ongoing, and we look forward to sharing further findings when it is ready. So thank you very much.
Across to you, Ben.
Thank you, Paul. So I'm just going to give an overview of what UNDP has done to support and why we think that grit is so important. Clearly, the mandate of UNDP in Ukraine in Mine Action is to support government structures and to support the ministries responsible, MOD, MOI, and Ministry of Economy, represented here by Berescovani. Now, to do that, we have to look at what precisely is going to make a big difference. And in this particular case, we're looking at maximizing the outcomes of mine action and also enabling recovery going forwards, economic development, which at the moment obviously is sort of not on hold, but is vastly slowed down. And how can we best do that? So we know very well that for the past 30 years, Paul alluded to it, one of the hardest things has been how to apply your scarce demining resources precisely in the places, surgically in the places that will have maximum outcomes, output. Be that protecting human life, or be it supporting economic development, and particularly in Ukraine, the whole issue of agricultural protection, or production, sorry. So Ukraine is famous, we hear about it all the time, for innovation, and for good reason, yeah? But within that, this particular innovation, the application of AI, which we know for negative and positive reasons is one of the facets of this conflict, but the application of AI for good, to maximize outcomes, to protect life, has been applied to this new system. A year ago, GRIT did not exist. It was a theoretical idea, which is why, with donors, we decided to clearly support Ministry of Economy, supporting a small Ukrainian startup company that has developed the tool. We've also supported the provision in the short term, medium term of quite a few of the data sources. And we've worked very closely with FAO on this as well in terms of the critical issue of soil quality, land productivity, and so on. And when you look at the range of data sources that we already have going in, it's extremely broad. There's demographic information, as say land, soil, land productivity data that is accurate. You have contamination data. And as I understand it, a lot of data already, a vast amount has already been hoovered into this system, and constantly it's expanding. So the thing can only grow and go forwards. So for us at UNDP now, we are handing over, with UA damage, the intellectual property to MOE, and we're very, very happy to see, for instance, JICA are now trialling this actively on the ground. And also, Deputy Minister Wright, the prioritization, a lot of the prioritization of tasking for next year has already been generated by GRIT. So it's work in progress, but we know that AI-driven functions across the board grow very rapidly. And the interesting thing is as well, I think, and this is why Paul was mentioning UMAS's engagement now in terms of the global possibility for all of us old dinosaurs. You know, this truly, I believe, could be a groundbreaking moment globally. And for a developing programs such as Syria, for instance, where, you know, finally, potentially, because we have to be careful as well, this is still in development, this system could be rolled out as a standard. As INSMA was, remember, in 1999, there was no standard system to map contaminated areas. It's the first time INSMA was used in a centralized way to record active clearance and SHAs and so on. That was a step forward, major. It enabled a Mine Action Center to coordinate for the first time really effectively. This is a quantum leap on for that potentially. So very exciting, very interesting. We are in the process of discussing, hopefully, further support now in terms of development of the tool. But for us, it's a critical element of allowing Ukraine to really apply its limited resources, relatively limited given the land mass contaminated, 133,000 estimated square kilometers at the moment, most effectively. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for all the panelists. We're doing quite well for time, unusually. First thing I'd actually like to do is I'd like to just put a big thank you out to the donors who've supported this project, particularly the British and the Swiss who took the initial punt to develop the pilot and to make it forward. So again, to all donors, sometimes it doesn't take a lot of money, but you can really move things forward. And I really, you know, the fact that this was really unproven, untested, but has had huge potential, and the fact that two donors were prepared to come together and support that, a big one. We're still looking for resources to expand this at scale across Ukraine. So please, if there's any donors in the room who's interested, please speak with Elena or Ben. You know, they're both in a position to accept checks. If there are any donors in the room who would really like to see this be rolled out at scale across the world, please come and speak to me, and I will very happily develop a concept note with my UNMAS colleagues, program managers, and look at which programs would do this. But you know, if there is a donor who's genuinely interested in trying to make a difference at scale across the country and prove this concept, you know, we really could do something on that. Again, I'm always breaking something. Would be very interested, you know, we'll go to questions, but again, please, donors, this has the potential to make your money go much further. Please take this opportunity to ask questions, and if you're a bit shy, please feel free to grab Ben, Elena, or myself afterwards. You know, I think this is something that really can change the way that Mine Action is planned, it's organized, it's prioritized, and moving towards this outcome-driven decision-making and data-driven decision-making. So thank you. Over to you for questions. Go. Yeah.
And I'm so sorry, let me jump in and say that if you would be interested in looking how the system works, not just PPT file, please do find me. I will show you everything from the laptop. Thank you.
Please.
Ejaz from ICC Pakistan. I have a question for the representative from FAO. She alluded to the soil contamination. The question is, has there been any study on soil contamination by explosives in Ukraine? And how is it addressed in practice? And for the GREET as well, will there be any support from GREET, to identify and map, where the soil is contaminated by explosives in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. So we tend to speak of soil pollution because as agronomists we would speak of soil contamination, but in this context it's a bit misleading the mine action people. So as far as chemical pollution is concerned, in Ukraine there exists an interministerial working group dedicated to soil pollution in the context of the land warfare. Within this interministerial working group you have the Ministry of Defense, that is mainly in charge of the field screening, meaning that they are the first having access to the land that is the most affected, to the land that has been exposed severely since now 2023. While the Ministry of Economy, Agriculture and Environment is analyzing more on what has been liberated in 2022. FAO is technical convener for this working group, and it integrates all of the best expertise that you can find in Ukraine. And Ukraine has a very strong legacy in terms of soil inventories, typologies, and everything has been digitalized, so we are very lucky in this specific case scenario. There are a lot of studies that are going on, also because there was quite big investment from the Horizon 2020 program from the EU. So there is a huge investment with universities that have a capacity. But I have to say that Ukraine created this group because all this effort needs to be coordinated. The issue when you don't coordinate soil contamination assessment is that by the end of the day, because you are using different protocols and values, you are comparing pineapples and oranges. And what we want is to have a solid data set so that Ukraine can use this in order to prioritize, first of all, through GREET, but also to lead the recovery, the agriculture recovery, and what will be their policy. So one issue, another one besides coordination, is that a lot of these studies were based on analyzing a single point, a single source of contamination, meaning the classic reflex of scientists was to go to a crater and to analyze a crater. And this is a consequence of what has been the history. The science has been led by the American Army in this context, and the American Army was using a lot the training centers, the fire range, and in this context it made sense. But when you look at what happened in Ukraine, unfortunately, you have cross-contamination all over the place with a lot of different weapons that have been used. And if you want to use this result in order to build food safety in the future, food security, recultivation, you need to consider reality, and reality is cross-contamination. So what will be possible with the GREET system combined with the artillery impact mapping, meaning craters mapping, and combined with the result of all the studies that are coordinating within the Ukraine working group on soil pollution, what is possible is to project and to modelize which lands will need certainly adapted crop systems or remediation. So the objective is to have in the 1 or 2 years to come a mapping that will be used to inform farmers that they will need to adapt their crop systems. So I hope this answers your question. Yes, there is a lot of data, but unfortunately to date it is impossible to specify that there is a trend. A last comment on this: even if a trend is identified, a correlation between the intensity of the artillery damage and soil contamination, this concerns a very, very specific percentage of soils in Ukraine, the land that hopefully will be liberated at some point, meaning the current front line, the former front line, what has been occupied during 7 months in 2022, for instance. And this, by the end of the day, is massive in terms of surface, but is still a very limited percentage of the surface that is used in Ukraine to produce. And this should be kept in mind in order to safeguard the reputation of Ukraine on international grain markets.
Hi, panel. Thank you so much for this presentation. My name is Svenja Liu from the GICHD. I had a quick question, and many of the panelists have already mentioned that these types of data-driven models really rely on having good data. And in this circumstance, we're not just talking about mine action-related data, we're also talking about data from many different areas, from FAO and from different government ministries as well. So I think from the mine action perspective, in order to make this system work, we really need to be building relationships, building governance models to ensure that this data can be properly linked across different systems. I'm wondering from the perspective of other countries that might be interested in looking at this type of model, what kind of advice would you give in having this work in practice? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I should take that. Thank you so much for this question. The very basics that need this system to work is basically territory ownership. So we are based on the hazardous polygons, but also territory cadastral plots. So this type of ownership is recognized through all of our government. So by knowing the cadastral number of the land parcel, we can talk to each and every ministry, to each and every register. So once the country has this system of cadastral plots or whichever territory management system exists, that will be the very good fundamental, like the starter. After that, it is possible to put a lot of information on this cadastral plot, but territory management system is absolutely crucial.
First of all, will and interest to this approach. Everything else, you can just create some artificial granularity and use it. Like main thing. It's a real idea to achieve some transparent result.
No.
Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to come back to the bias, because this is really something that is important. I mean, we have the case of the Orange Zone after liberation of territories in Ukraine. In Syria, you might know that mine action data is really incomplete, and there is an opposite bias that we would tend to believe that what is not documented might be safe. So there is really this bias with data, and there might be the risk that is related to any artificial intelligence use. I mean, we are all using artificial intelligence, and we are all tempted to get the problems of our lives solved by artificial intelligence. And in this context, it's very important as a government to avoid the temptation of seeing a political decision being decided by the result of the artificial intelligence operationalization, meaning that it's first a political discussion, a political direction on recovery, and then we ask the artificial intelligence to operationalize what we already decided at the level of a government. And we are really glad that we've seen this discussion happen in Ukraine before GRID would be operationalized, and that's really important.
I would also add, don't be limited by your own imagination. There is so many different sources of data out there, and finding them. I mean, one that came to us was suddenly realizing that if we engage with Kyivstar, who is like the biggest mobile phone network in the country, we could get anonymized data from them, which allows us to know where people are and where cell phones are operating. So if you think in the old days in Sudan, we used to say, we consider a road open if 100 vehicles have been up and down it. Now we can go, well, 100 cell phones have been up and down it today, or was it the same cell phone went up and down it every day for 100 days? And so, the sources of data out there, we don't even know how many are. So just opening that up and understanding who is generating data, who's tracking data, and also I think engaging with people who are doing things like flying drones, whether it's agricultural drones or whatever, see if you can get the imagery on the data that's coming from that. So as many sources as possible. And I think going on to the AI side of things, I mean, at the moment we're talking about a system that will prioritize, but as this system learns, it will start to be able to recommend the type of detector that should be used, whether mechanical assets are appropriate. If so, which mechanical asset is appropriate. We'll be able to plan the logistics of that. So what would be the fuel burn rate of that machine, or what's the service schedule on it? So, suddenly the amount of command and control that will come through this is going to be immense. And if you using one detector gave you 10% efficiency over the use of a different detector on a $350 million program, which is Ukraine at the moment, that's $35 million a year in savings just by using the right piece of kit on the right task. And at the moment, that's all being made by human operators, but by, I'm not saying we would hand control over, but we're saying, Grit could come back and say, recommend we should be using this machine type, to put the breach lanes in, should be cancelling the area that is low suspect using, an animal detection system, and that, at this end of the area, there's high mineralization, so we should use a ground compensating detector, but at this end, the soil type is different, and we don't need to. So that ability to help plan the actual deployment of tasks is going to be huge, and again, potentially huge cost savings as a result. Any other?
Thanks. Maybe I can mention a couple of issues related, which nothing is without some problems, right? So there are still some questions, reference Grit, scaling up, ownership of data, and so on, that we're facing. So we've supported the development of a tool, the Grit tool. But of course, another generation doesn't really understand these things, but it needs an operating system. Without an operating system, it's just an add-on tool. So at the moment, the operating system is Palantir. Licensing, licenses, and other issues around Palantir are things that should be acknowledged and noted, and it is a question going forwards. And clearly in our discussions with the government, we have agreed there's a real need here for an potentially alternate nationally owned operating system, which I think is not an easy thing to do, to be developed. And this, I think, needs to be talking to donors, reaching out to potentially other countries that may want to use this system. This is something that now I think needs investment and focus. The Grit tool, it works. It needs a lot of development. There are questions. But the operating system, we have to look at that. And this long-term sustainability and the ownership of data and so on. So these issues still really need to be explored in more detail. We're at an excellent point now. But now other issues, as always with these things, open up and we can't ignore them. So just to flag that.
So a few more questions. Let's start this way. So,
yes, thank you, Paul. Libomir from Maria Aid Canada. Could you speak to the plans for integrating contamination of infrastructure, of utility infrastructure, such as electrical lines, water lines, the supply of gas? Those elements of infrastructure, of course, are particularly targeted now with booby traps, as well as buildings such as barns, such as homes, warehouses, into which FPV drones could fly into, run out of battery, and sit there waiting for detonation in the future. Is there a plan to integrate mapping at that level of granularity for infrastructure and structures like that?
We have already integrated this data. So as I mentioned, we are calculating environmental, social, and economic potential, and you cannot calculate economic potential without integrating the data about the buildings, integrating the data about barns, elevators, and so on. So we have already integrated it. We are a bit cautious with the data about the infrastructure. You won't be able to see it on our system, but it is there, and it affects our prioritization scores.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Pablo Parra. I'm the Mine Action Advisor to the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. And Ben, thank you for your last comment about the challenges to implement GRID at a nationwide in Ukraine. I think Ukraine is very well placed having the Ministry of Economy, Environment and Agriculture leading this initiative because it has all the incentives in line, and the ministry is definitely trying to bring back together the economy in Ukraine. My question to Deputy Minister Beskaravaini would be, what are the plans and what are the challenges also to have such a powerful system informing broader strategical decisions within the government of Ukraine?
A lot of billions US dollars and years. It's the main challenge. Create such system like now we're using, it's need a lot of investment and time to create. It's main restriction. Is it possible? Yes. Are we want to have in ownership and like a government of Ukraine independent on such system? Yes. But restriction so big. No, probably in some future, after half year, everything will change. Probably no, but now, yeah, it's main.
If I may add a little bit what Mr. Beskaravaini mentioned, that's why JICA also wanted to support that process, try to provide a more practical lesson learned by conducting their pilot on the ground. So especially how to make it possible, this prioritization process, especially focusing on the local government capacity. I know that we are working with the Ministry of Economy and Environmental Agriculture at the central level, but at the same time, we try to connect the dot at the national level, also the local level, and then try to capture the best way for the people of the Ukraine in terms of nexus approach from the mine action to the this kind of recovery development plan. So also previously I had a chance to discuss with the Minister of Economy on this issue. So, but depending on the from other situation or local situations, we have to cannot one fit all types of the criteria. Sometimes may have some issues. So in that sense, also JICA also try to provide some useful lesson. So just wanted that. Thank you so much.
Hi, Louise Wilson from Mine Action Review. Thank you to all the panellists for your very informative presentations. I wanted to ask which mine action stakeholders currently have access to the GRIT system in terms of providing data and using the system to assist in their own planning for their operations, and what's the kind of imagined direction of travel as to which stakeholders will be able to do that in the future?
So the system is owned by the Center of Humanitarian Demining, and the center is using the system for planning the demining for 2026, for example. We are working on providing the access to the center, National Mine Action Center. I mean, we are ready to provide the access, they just need to ask for it. And the same goes with the mine action operators, so we are ready to provide the access to the system, they just need to ask it from the Center of Humanitarian Demining, and then we will be able to provide this information upon the permission from the Center of Humanitarian Demining.
Okay, thank you.
But what's, again, hard to explain, if we will provide access to some of actors in our ecosystem, it's not mean that they automatically have ability use full power of the system. Because main magic happening in the brain of data engineer who stabilizes the data and building algorithm. If we're talking about mine action center operators and so on, they can use some like super small piece of this system, like some dashboard, creates fast analytics or some maps, some fast information. Not about big scenes that when we're talking about some prioritization, some big data analysis, or something else.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Chris Tierney from Norwegian People's Aid. I have a question in reference to cost and how much did it cost to set the system up, and what is the value of the data that you have currently sitting in it? How much did it cost to get that data together? before putting it in the system? And what is the ongoing costs per year? To give an indication of if we apply this into another country, how much it's going to cost that country and how much, the donors or the government need to put forward. Thank you.
I will go with the answer for this question. Talking about the receiving of data, we are quite lucky to be working with the government, so a lot of data we are just receiving because of the governmental exchange. We are extremely grateful to the support of the UNDP because we are also buying some data, but also when we are talking to the data providers about our mission, they are basically just providing us data for the cost of their work. So it's not, they are not earning when they are providing us with data. And of course, the main challenge for us remains the licensing from our host agent. And depending on the amount of the calculations that will be necessary, depending on the amount of people who will be accessing the system, the cost might differ. Anyway, we know the range and we will be very happy to discuss it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, and just to add, operating system licenses, again, which is why national ownership and a nationally developed operating system is definitely preferable. Or the sort of setup you have with an IMSMA where it's somehow globally owned, I don't know, but something like that. Obviously, you have the cost of salaries for team. I think quite a lot of data increasingly, because this only started a year ago, should be, especially in a country under the current situation Ukraine is, for the public interest, pro bono, if that's the right word, data. The other issue with data we have to be very careful about, and we've been very observant of, is proper data management, data security, anonymization of data, and so on. These need to fit, because this is all taking place within the framework of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. It's not their system, but basically they're responsible for authorizing, guiding, approving any governmental software that's going to be integrated into the national systems. So everything is under their scrutiny. So quite rightly, there's a lot of scrutiny undertaken on all these levels. But cost-wise, I think it's one of those things where there are more costs initially, but if this grid system could become more globalized, as with IMSMA, it could become more systematized and the costs could be certainly more predictable and brought down. But that's for the future.
Yeah, I think at the moment we don't know all of the costs. As some things have been provided pro bono that may not be in the future. There may be some sources of data that we don't know exist yet that would have a cost. The big one is obviously satellite imagery. If we have a donor who is prepared to, or a benefactor who will be prepared to provide high quality, high resolution satellite imagery, I don't know, say Google Maps wanted to make a donation, it would do it. And again, I think as Ben says, if we do roll this out globally across other programs, but again, if you think global humanitarian mine action is maybe $1 billion a year, if we find a 1% saving, that's $10 million. And it's going to be one of those type of calculations of, a little bit of, yes, well, this costs this much, but we save this much, and we improve efficiency by this. And I mean, ultimately, which has always been the challenge of what we do, is how much is a leg worth, or how much is a life worth? And if this speeds that process up, I will always live with the consequences of a minefield in Angola where we were trying to mobilize the money for another team.